Facebook have their own Supreme Court, apparently. This is what people are calling it. It's a group that decide major decisions as to what can and cannot stay on the platform. And of course, they've made a very big decision about the former president, Trump. And now that decision has come under scrutiny. So exactly who are these people? What is the decision that they're making? We have Ariel Bogle from the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and Cam Wilson from Crikey. Ariel, I'll start with you. Let's just talk about this quote-unquote Supreme Court. Who are they and what is it that they've decided?
The Facebook Oversight Board, it's a body of independent experts, I suppose, mostly lawyers, let's be honest. So at the moment, say, if you have a post that is removed by Facebook, maybe it says that you broke hate speech rules or you're harassing somebody or it's inappropriate nudity, they take it down. And this is kind of the highest point that you can appeal that decision to. And so, of course, in the wake of January 6th, the riot in the US Capitol, Facebook, along with Twitter and YouTube, took some dramatic steps around Donald Trump's account. And in the case of Facebook, it claimed that Trump's content had been inciting violence and it sort of put him on an indefinite suspension. They later referred that decision to the Facebook Oversight Board, and last week the board came back with its decision. It did not overturn Facebook's decision to indefinitely suspend Trump, but it essentially punted it back to Facebook. It said, look, your policy around this kind of issue is not clear. You need to take 6 months and come back with a new decision around Trump's account, and we'll take it from there.
So, all right. So, Cameron, let's talk about the decision itself. Do you think they made the right decision punting it back to Facebook then?
You know, at the end of the day, this oversight board doesn't really have that much power. You know, at any point, Facebook can just be like, no, we don't agree with your decision and we're going to ignore it. I mean, they said that they will respect it, but in this circumstance, there's nothing actually binding them to do so. What I think the real value is in it is starting to delve into some of these kind of more nuanced debates and in a more transparent way. You know, a lot of content moderation is just decided, I reckon, on the fly. And there are very kind of big and vague policies, and to some extent they have to be. You've got to deal with a whole variety of human behaviour. What this decision does is kind of go into it and say, you need to be more specific on this. You know, specifically, you know, you've banned Trump, you've found these posts that he did violated your inciting violence policy, and as a result, you know, yes, you've decided to ban them, but you can't just do that willy-nilly. You can't just say, we'll ban you and we'll kind of get back to it at some point. They're saying you kind of need some kind of specificity about it. And I think that's kind of important. In this situation, we're seeing a company and, you know, its extension, of course it's independent, but it is part of it, kind of have to have that debate in the open.
Is there a sense that perhaps now that they've sort of trialled it on Trump, that they might actually start using this mechanism on other world leaders, other politicians?
As the board punted it back to Facebook, I guess we'll have to see if they do decide within the 6 months the board recommended, if they do actually come up with a new mechanism. The board also points out in its decision, is it good to distinguish, I suppose, between influential figures and politicians? Because there are a lot of very influential figures on Facebook that have a lot of influence over what happens and on the platform. And should they be treated differently from Trump? I mean, this is a question that Facebook is going to have to wrestle with itself. The issues from the start anyway with representation on the board. Yeah. Facebook did attempt to have representatives from, you know, all over the world. But, you know, I think by some estimates, about 25% are still US-based. I mean, it is a US company, to be fair, but there are billions of users all over the world. And do they have sufficient representation from other countries? And do they have sufficient representation of the right type of people? As I mentioned, there are a lot of lawyers and legal academics who do great work, no doubt. But what about representation from actual content creators or from the people that do the work of content moderation itself? What about from community groups? There's a whole lot of people that might have something to say about the role of politicians on platforms like Facebook and the dangerous kind of rhetoric and influence they can have on the platform.
All right, there is lots more of this in the podcast of Download This Show. It is available on all of the good and some of the mediocre podcasting apps. You can find it now wherever you find your podcasts. I'll see you there.